Tom stood on his porch, holding a bright yellow envelope that had been taped to his front door. His wife, Maria, leaned over his shoulder to read the bold black letters across the front. It said, "Homeowners Association Violation Notice." Tom sighed. Again? What could it be this time? Maria shook her head. Last month they said the grass was too long. The month before they said our trash cans were visible. Now what? He tore open the envelope. Inside was a printed letter full of rules and numbers. At the bottom, the amount owed made his eyes widen. Fine, $5,500. Maria gasped. $5,500? For what? Tom read aloud. Failure to follow HOA landscaping guidelines. Unauthorized mailbox color. Fence height violation. Maria pointed toward their neat lawn and plain wooden fence. Our yard looks fine. The fence is the same as everyone else's. And the mailbox is just black. How is that unauthorized? Tom chuckled bitterly. Because Karen doesn't like it? Everyone in the neighborhood knew who Karen was. She was the head of the HOA board, always walking around with a clipboard, always watching. She had a sharp voice and loved to lecture others about rules no one had ever heard of before. She even carried a small camera to take pictures of houses that didn't meet standards. Maria crossed her arms. This is ridiculous. I'm not paying $5,000 for a fence and a mailbox. That evening, Karen knocked on their door. She wore her usual press suit and a large badge-shaped necklace that she thought made her look official. Behind her glasses, her eyes were cold and firm. I see you got the notice, she said with a smile that wasn't friendly. Your property continues to bring down neighborhood value. You have 30 days to pay. If not, further action will be taken. Tom stayed calm. Karen, our house is in good shape. We mow the lawn, the fence is fine, and the mailbox is standard. We're not paying $5,000 for nonsense. Karen's smile vanished. If you ignore the rules, you ignore the contract you signed when you moved here. The HOA has authority. I will not let one family disrespect it. Maria stepped forward. We didn't agree to be bullied. We bought this house to live in peace. Karen leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was issuing a threat. If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement. Tom almost laughed. For a mailbox? Good luck with that. Karen stormed away, heels clicking on the pavement, already dialing her phone. The next morning, Tom and Maria were sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, when flashing lights appeared outside. A police car parked in front of their house. Two neighbors peeked through blinds, curious about the scene. Maria groaned. She actually called the cops. An officer walked up the porch and knocked. He looked young, polite, and slightly nervous. Tom opened the door. Sir, ma'am, the officer said carefully. We got a complaint from the HOA regarding unpaid fines and property violations. They claim you're refusing to cooperate. Tom raised his eyebrows. You mean Karen called? The officer cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Karen reported a disturbance and financial dispute. I'm required to check. Maria stood tall. There is no disturbance. This is about a made-up fine. The HOA is harassing us. Karen marched up quickly, pointing her finger at Maria. Officer, they are ignoring legal orders. They owe the association $5,500. They must be cited immediately. The officer hesitated, holding his notepad. Ma'am, HOA fines are civil matters, not criminal. We usually don't intervene. Karen frowned. But they are breaking the law. Arrest them. Tom crossed his arms. You can't arrest someone over a mailbox color. This is harassment. The officer looked uncomfortable. He turned to Maria. Ma'am, may I ask your full name for the record? Maria nodded calmly. Maria Lopez. The officer froze. His pen stopped moving. His eyes flicked up in shock. You're Judge Lopez. The neighbors gasped behind their curtains. Even Karen's mouth fell open. Maria was indeed Judge Maria Lopez, a respected federal judge who had lived quietly in the neighborhood without drawing attention. The officer quickly straightened his stance. Your Honor. I didn't realize. My apologies. I'll file this as a civil dispute, not a police matter. Karen stuttered. Wait, Judge. Maria looked directly at her, voice steady. Yes, Karen. And you just tried to misuse law enforcement against my family. This is not going to end the way you think. The street outside Maria's house stayed quiet after the officer left, but the silence carried tension. Neighbors whispered from behind blinds, surprised by what they had just learned. No one knew Maria was a federal judge. She and Tom had lived simply, never boasting about her position, never asking for special treatment. But now the secret was out. Karen stood frozen at the edge of the driveway. Her face was pale, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She had always enjoyed being the loudest voice in the neighborhood, but in that moment, she felt her power slip away. Maria folded her arms and looked straight at her. Karen, I suggest you stop using threats. If you continue, this becomes a legal issue, and I know exactly how to handle it. Tom stood beside his wife, steady and calm. We only wanted peace. But if you keep pushing, you'll regret bringing this into a courtroom. Karen's jaw tightened. This isn't over. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels tapping fast on the pavement. She didn't look as confident as before. That evening, Tom and Maria sat on their porch. The sky was painted orange as the sun dipped low. A few neighbors slowly approached, unsure if they should come closer. Finally, an older man named David, who lived across the street, stepped forward. Judge Lopez, he said politely. I never knew. But I'm glad you spoke up today. Karen has been a problem for years. She fines people for silly things. She once fined me for leaving a garden hose out. Another neighbor, Sarah, joined in. She fined me for planting flowers she claimed were not allowed colors. Maria listened carefully. She had always kept a low profile, but now she realized her position could help more than just her family. If the HOA is abusing power, maybe it's time someone stopped them, she said. Tom nodded. Enough is enough. Meanwhile, Karen sat in her living room, pacing. She spoke on the phone in a hushed voice. I don't care if she's a judge. She signed the HOA agreement when she bought the house. That makes her subject to the rules. On the other end of the line, another board member hesitated. But Karen, if she takes this to court, we'll lose. She knows the law better than us. Karen gripped the phone tightly. No. If I give up now, everyone will ignore the rules. I'll find another way. The next morning, Maria received a thick packet in the mail. It was from the HOA board. Inside were photographs of her fence, her mailbox, and even the flower pots by her door. Each picture was labeled with claims of violations. At the bottom, the fine amount was repeated, $5,500. Tom sighed as he flipped through the pages. They really don't give up. Maria looked at the papers calmly. This isn't just about us anymore. If Karen does this to everyone, then she's abusing her position. I'm going to call a meeting with the homeowners. That evening, Maria and Tom went door to door, inviting neighbors to gather in their yard. By nightfall, nearly half the neighborhood had shown up, curious and hopeful. Maria stood on the porch to speak. I kept quiet because I wanted a peaceful life here, she began. But what happened yesterday showed me how far things have gone. Karen has turned the HOA into her personal tool. She fines people unfairly, she uses threats, and she even called the police for something that is not a crime. That ends now. The neighbors clapped softly, their faces relieved. David raised his hand. What can we do? She runs the board. She never lets anyone else have a say. Maria smiled. HOAs are run by elected members. That means Karen's position is not permanent. If enough homeowners agree, we can vote her out. The crowd murmured with interest. Some nodded eagerly. Sarah added, count me in. I've been waiting for a chance to stop her. Maria looked at Tom, then back at the group. We'll need proof of her misuse of power. Bring me your letters, fines, and notices. Together, we'll build a case. The neighbors began pulling out papers, folders, and even phone photos. Maria collected them, each one telling the same story. Karen had fined people for nonsense, from holiday decorations to mailbox paint chips. Tom whispered, she won't see this coming. Maria answered firmly, she asked for this fight. Now she'll get it. By the end of the night, Maria had a stack of evidence. The neighbors left with hopeful smiles, whispering about change. For the first time in years, they felt someone was standing up to Karen. But inside her house, Karen stared at her phone, reading messages from other board members who were now nervous. She clenched her fists and muttered, they think they can replace me? I built this HOA. I won't let them take it away. The battle for control of the neighborhood had just begun. The morning sun shone brightly over the neighborhood, but the mood was different. For years, most homeowners had walked carefully, afraid of being targeted by Karen and her constant notices. Now, after the meeting at Maria's house, people felt a spark of hope. Maria sat at her dining table, sorting through stacks of papers the neighbors had given her. Each letter told the same story: unreasonable fines, threats of legal action, and intimidation. Tom brought her coffee and looked at the growing pile. That's enough to show a pattern, he said. Maria nodded. Yes. And with all of this, we can call for a special election. The board rules say if a majority signs a petition, we can remove her from her position. Tom smiled. Karen has no idea what's coming. Meanwhile, Karen was not resting. She called an emergency meeting with the remaining board members in her living room. She stood at the front, pacing, while 2 men and 1 woman sat stiffly on the couch. They're planning something, Karen said sharply. Judge or not, Maria cannot overthrow us. We are the authority here. One of the men, Paul, cleared his throat. But Karen, if she collects enough signatures, she can force a vote. It's in the bylaws. We can't stop that. Karen glared. Then we change the bylaws. We'll say violations must be cleared before a homeowner can vote. If they owe money, they lose their right. The woman frowned. That would silence half the neighborhood. It's not fair. Karen slammed her clipboard on the table. Fair? Do you think I built this HOA for fairness? I built it to keep order. If we lose control, chaos will follow. The board members exchanged nervous glances. None of them had the courage to challenge her directly, but the seed of doubt had been planted. 2 days later, Maria and Tom walked through the neighborhood with a petition. One by one, people signed eagerly. David signed first, then Sarah, then nearly everyone who had once been fined for something silly. By evening, they had more than half the neighborhood on their side. At the end of the day, Maria stood in her yard holding the papers. It's official, she said. We have the signatures. We can demand a vote. Tom patted her shoulder. Now we see how strong Karen really is. That night, Karen opened her mailbox and found the petition envelope. She tore it open, her face growing red as she read each signature. Nearly all her neighbors had turned against her. She crumpled the paper in her hand. They want war? Then war is what they'll get, she hissed. The special HOA meeting was scheduled for the weekend in the community center. Word spread quickly, and when the day arrived, the room was packed. People filled the chairs, stood against walls, even crowded near the doorway. At the front table sat Karen and the board. She wore her usual press suit, but her eyes darted nervously around the room. Across from her sat Maria, calm and professional, with Tom by her side and a folder of documents in front of her. Karen slammed her gavel on the table. This meeting will come to order. Some residents believe they can challenge the authority of the HOA board. Let it be known, all unpaid fines must be settled before votes are valid. Gasps spread through the room. Sarah stood up from her chair. That's not in the rules. Karen lifted her chin. It is now. We voted to amend the bylaws. Maria rose slowly to her feet. Her voice was clear and steady. You can't change bylaws without notifying homeowners first. And you can't silence voters because you fear the outcome. That's called abuse of power. Karen's face turned red. Abuse of power? I am protecting this community. Maria opened her folder and began reading from the evidence. Here are 25 separate fines issued without justification. Here are threats of police involvement, which are not the HOA's role. Here are letters demanding payment for unauthorized flowers and improper bird feeders. This is not protection. This is harassment. The crowd murmured louder. People nodded, whispering to one another. Karen pounded the gavel again. Silence. You don't understand what it takes to keep order here. David shouted from the back, we understand perfectly. You made life miserable for us. We're done being afraid. The room erupted in claps and cheers. Karen's eyes darted around the crowd, searching for support, but most of the board members looked away. She realized she was standing alone. Maria placed the petition on the table. We have enough signatures. By law, we demand a vote tonight. Karen clenched her fists. You'll regret this. But for the first time, Karen's voice trembled. The room was filled with tension as Maria's words echoed. The neighbors sat straighter in their chairs, while Karen gripped her gavel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The once confident leader of the HOA suddenly looked cornered. Tom placed a calm hand on Maria's shoulder and whispered, You've got them listening. Don't stop now. Maria gave a small nod and looked around the room. This neighborhood deserves fairness. We bought homes to live in peace, not to be punished for flowers, fences, or mailboxes. The HOA was created to maintain harmony, but under Karen's leadership, it became a tool of fear. That ends tonight. Applause rippled through the crowd. Sarah stood and added loudly, "She fined me $300 for leaving my recycling bin out one day late. That's not harmony." David followed. "She tried to charge me $500 for holiday lights, saying they were too bright. My grandchildren loved those lights. Why should joy cost a fine?" Dozens of voices rose, sharing similar stories. One by one, the neighbors told how Karen had embarrassed, threatened, and drained them with unfair rules. Each testimony piled on the weight pressing down on Karen. Her eyes darted across the room, desperate to find support. She turned to the other board members, but they sat in silence, faces down, unwilling to defend her. Finally, Maria raised her hand, and the room grew quiet. "We have the signatures for a vote. I ask that all homeowners present raise their hands if they wish to remove Karen as HOA president." For a brief moment, silence filled the air. Then, slowly, hands began to rise. First Sarah's, then David's, then row after row until nearly every hand in the room was lifted. The sight was overwhelming. Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't do this. I made this neighborhood beautiful. Without me, property values will fall. Without me, you'll have chaos." Maria's voice stayed firm. "Order is not created through fear. True order comes from respect and fairness. Tonight, the people have spoken." The board secretary, a quiet man who rarely raised his voice, finally spoke. "By majority vote, Karen is removed as HOA president." The crowd erupted in cheers. Neighbors clapped, some even hugged. For the first time in years, relief filled the community. Karen, however, wasn't ready to accept defeat. She slammed her gavel against the table. "This is illegal. I'll sue every one of you. You'll regret this decision." Maria calmly closed her folder. "You may try, but the law is clear. And unlike your notices, the law is not something you can bend to your will." After the meeting ended, people gathered around Maria and Tom outside the community center. Smiles spread across tired faces. "You gave us back our voice," Sarah said with tears of gratitude. David patted Tom on the back. "You both stood up when we were too afraid." "Thank you." Maria shook her head softly. "This was not just me. It was all of us together. That's how communities are supposed to work." Tom smiled at her proudly. "Still, you led the way. And now we can finally breathe again." Later that night, Karen sat alone in her living room. The silence felt heavier than ever. Her clipboard, once her symbol of control, lay on the table untouched. For years she had commanded fear, but now, her neighbors had stripped away her power with a single vote. She muttered under her breath, "They'll see. They'll miss me when things fall apart." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her mind. Deep down, she knew the truth: her rule had been built on threats, not respect. Back at Maria's house, Tom poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to his wife. They sat together in the quiet kitchen. "You think she'll try something again?" Tom asked. Maria looked thoughtful. "Karen doesn't give up easily. She may look for another angle. But now she knows the people are against her. And if she does try again, we'll be ready." Tom chuckled. "I never thought moving here would feel like a courtroom drama." Maria smiled faintly. "Sometimes justice finds you, even in the quietest neighborhoods." They both knew the fight wasn't over. But for now, the night felt lighter. The neighbors had found courage, and the balance of power had shifted. And Karen, once the queen of the block, was now just another homeowner stripped of the authority she had abused for too long. The morning after the vote, the neighborhood felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. Children played freely in their yards, people waved to one another, and a sense of relief hung in the air. For once, no one worried about whether Karen would appear with her clipboard. Tom mowed the lawn while Maria watered the flowers. Sarah walked over with a smile. "I can finally enjoy gardening without worrying about a fine." "Thank you both again." Maria returned the smile. "It wasn't just us. Everyone made it possible." But even as neighbors celebrated, Maria felt a small unease in her chest. She knew Karen too well. Someone who had tasted that much control would not give it up quietly. That same morning, Karen sat at her dining table, staring at her laptop. Anger burned in her chest as she typed furiously. She had already emailed a lawyer, attaching pages of HOA rules and claiming the vote was invalid. Her phone rang, and she answered quickly. "Yes, this is Karen. I need to file an injunction. They removed me illegally. I was protecting the community." On the other end, the lawyer spoke carefully. "Mrs. Karen, I reviewed the documents you sent. According to the HOA bylaws, the vote was perfectly valid. Unless you can prove fraud, there isn't much we can do." Karen's jaw tightened. "So you're saying they win?" "I'm saying they followed the rules. If you fight this in court, it will be expensive, and you'll likely lose." She hung up without another word. Rage and humiliation filled her. For years she had ruled the neighborhood without question, and now she was powerless. But then an idea struck her. If she couldn't fight them through the HOA, maybe she could go higher. She grabbed her phone again and began making calls, determined to find someone in local government who would listen to her complaints. By afternoon, Maria received a letter in her mailbox. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from the county office. The letter claimed there had been reports of property violations on her land, and an inspector would be visiting soon. Tom read it over her shoulder. "This has Karen's fingerprints all over it?" Maria sighed. "She's trying to use county officials now. She won't stop." "Do we need to be worried?" Tom asked. Maria shook her head. "No. Our property is fine. If an inspector comes, we'll show them everything. But this proves Karen isn't finished." That evening, Maria hosted another small meeting at her home. Neighbors filled the living room, concerned about the new letter. "She's trying to drag the county into this," Sarah said. "Can she even do that?" Maria replied calmly. "Anyone can file a complaint. But unless there's proof, it won't hold up. Still, it shows she's desperate. We have to stay united." David added, "She wants to scare us back into silence. If we fall apart now, she'll win." Maria nodded. "That's why we must stay strong. The law is on our side. And if she crosses the line, we'll take it further." The neighbors agreed. They had lived too long under fear to back down now. 2 days later, a county inspector did arrive. A man in a plain shirt walked around Maria's yard, clipboard in hand. He checked the fence, the lawn, and the mailbox. After 15 minutes, he returned to the porch. "Mrs. Lopez, everything here is perfectly fine," he said kindly. "We received several complaints, but none of them have merit. I'll be closing the case immediately." Maria thanked him, and Tom shook his hand. As the inspector left, Tom muttered, "Another one of Karen's plans crushed." Maria looked toward Karen's house across the street. The curtains moved slightly, as if someone was watching. She's not done, Maria said quietly. But every time she pushes, we'll push back harder. That night, Karen sat in her dark living room, staring out the window at Maria's house. Her phone buzzed with messages from former board members, asking her to let it go. But Karen couldn't let it go. They think they've beaten me, she whispered. But I'll find a way. I always do. Her eyes narrowed with determination. And though the neighborhood celebrated its new freedom, Maria knew this was only the calm before the next storm. The days passed quietly after the county inspector's visit, but the peace felt fragile. Neighbors tried to enjoy their freedom, planting flowers, putting up decorations, and sitting outside without fear of a sudden fine. Still, everyone knew Karen was plotting something new. Maria kept watch from her porch. She saw Karen coming and going often, carrying folders and talking on her phone with an intensity that made it clear she wasn't finished. Tom joined her one evening with 2 cups of tea. She looks busier now than when she was HOA president, he said. Maria nodded. She's looking for another weapon. She won't accept defeat. Karen had indeed been busy. She drove to the city office, met with clerks, and filed multiple complaints. Each was denied, but she didn't stop. She spent nights drafting letters, claiming the HOA vote was invalid, insisting that Maria had manipulated the community. Finally, she decided on her boldest move yet. She wrote a formal complaint addressed to the State Judicial Board. In the letter, she accused Maria of abusing her position as a federal judge to intimidate neighbors and gain power. She sealed the envelope with satisfaction. This will ruin her reputation, Karen said to herself. If she loses her title, she loses everything. 1 week later, Maria received an official-looking envelope in the mail. She read it carefully at the kitchen table while Tom watched her face. "What is it?" he asked. Maria exhaled slowly. "Karen filed a complaint against me with the Judicial Board. She claims I used my position to threaten her." Tom's eyes widened. "That's outrageous. You never even mentioned your job until she forced it out of you." Maria folded the paper calmly. "I know. But the board takes all complaints seriously. They'll review this." Tom frowned. "Can this hurt you?" Maria met his eyes. "If they believed her lies, yes. But I have proof and witnesses. The truth is on our side." That evening, Maria called a meeting with the neighbors again. Everyone gathered in her living room, worried by the new development. "She's gone too far this time," Sarah said angrily. "Filing false claims about you. That's beyond unfair." David added, "We were all there. We saw everything. You never threatened her. She's twisting the story." Maria raised her hand to quiet the room. "I'm not afraid of her lies. But I'll need your support. The board may contact you as witnesses. If that happens, just tell the truth." The neighbors nodded firmly. "We will," Sarah promised. For the first time, Maria saw unity stronger than fear. Karen had pushed so hard that the community had truly bonded together. The next day, Maria drove to the courthouse to meet with a review officer from the Judicial Board. She brought a folder of documents and copies of the unfair fines, along with signed statements from neighbors. The officer, a calm man with gray hair, listened carefully. "Judge Lopez, we received this complaint. But after reading the details, I had doubts. The claims seemed personal rather than professional. Please, explain your side." Maria laid out every document. "These are the notices Karen sent. Here are testimonies from over 20 homeowners. This wasn't about my job, it was about her abuse of power. The officer looked through the papers, nodding. This is clear evidence. Thank you for your cooperation. By the end of the meeting, Maria felt lighter. She knew justice was already on her side. Back in the neighborhood, Karen waited eagerly for news. She imagined Maria being questioned, her reputation falling, her career destroyed. But days later, a letter arrived at her own home. She tore it open quickly, expecting victory. Her face dropped as she read. The judicial board dismissed her complaint entirely, calling it unfounded and lacking evidence. No, she whispered. This can't be. Her last card had failed. That evening, as the sun set, Maria stood in her yard. Neighbors came by with smiles and encouragement. Sarah handed her a basket of fresh fruit. David shook Tom's hand firmly. You beat her again, David said. But more than that, you showed us what real leadership looks like. Maria smiled warmly. This wasn't about winning. It was about reminding all of us that fairness matters. And together, we made that happen. Still, as she looked across the street at Karen's darkened windows, Maria knew one thing for certain: Karen might have lost the battle, but she was not the type to accept defeat quietly. The air in the neighborhood felt different now. Weeks had passed since the failed complaint against Maria, and Karen's power had faded into silence. Where once there had been fear, now there was laughter, children playing, and neighbors helping one another. Tom noticed it most while mowing the lawn. Instead of quiet, tense streets, he now saw families waving, chatting, and sharing smiles. Maria watched from the porch, feeling proud of the change. This is what a community should be, she said softly. Tom smiled back. And you helped them believe in it again. But across the street, Karen sat by her window, staring out with bitterness. Her clipboard, once her constant companion, lay untouched on the table. The phone calls she used to make, the threats she used to send, none of it mattered now. Her neighbors ignored her. She muttered to herself, they turned on me. After everything I did. Her reflection in the glass looked tired. The truth gnawed at her: she hadn't built respect, only resentment. One Saturday morning, the new HOA meeting took place at the community center. This time, the room was filled not with tension but with energy. People brought homemade snacks, children played in the corner, and the atmosphere was warm. Maria didn't sit at the front. She chose a simple chair in the middle of the crowd. She didn't want to lead the HOA, she only wanted fairness. David stood at the front instead, holding a paper. We need a new president. Someone who will listen, not control. I nominate Sarah. Cheers filled the room. Sarah blushed but nodded. If you all trust me, I'll do my best. The vote was quick, and Sarah became the new HOA president. Instead of strict rules, she promised balance, keeping the neighborhood neat but never punishing people for small things. The crowd clapped, happy with the decision. Maria leaned toward Tom. This is the right path. The neighborhood belongs to them, not to fear. Later that evening, Maria walked home from the meeting. As she passed Karen's house, she noticed the curtains twitch. A moment later, Karen stepped outside. For the first time, Karen looked less like the proud enforcer and more like a weary neighbor. She crossed her arms, hesitating before speaking. You must be proud, Karen said coldly. Everyone loves you now. Maria stopped at the sidewalk. I'm not proud of defeating you, Karen. I'm proud the community found its voice. Karen's jaw tightened. They betrayed me. I kept this place in order. Without me, it'll fall apart. Maria shook her head. Order without kindness isn't order at all. People followed you because they were scared, not because they respected you. For a moment, Karen's face softened. She almost looked regretful, but pride quickly returned. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. Maria gave a calm smile. It's not my victory. It's everyone's. Then she walked away, leaving Karen alone in the fading light. Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood flourished. Families painted their fences, planted colorful gardens, and decorated for holidays without fear. Instead of notices, they shared recipes, tools, and smiles. Tom hosted a barbecue one weekend, and nearly the whole neighborhood came. Laughter filled the air as children played games and adults sat together sharing stories. Maria looked around and saw what true community felt like. Sarah raised a glass to Judge Lopez and Tom for standing up when we couldn't. The neighbors cheered. Maria laughed softly. It wasn't just us. It was all of us together. That's how it should always be. As the evening ended and people returned home, Maria and Tom sat quietly on their porch. The stars twinkled above, and the street was peaceful. Tom leaned back in his chair. Think Karen will ever change? Maria looked across the street at Karen's dark house. The curtains were drawn, but no threats, no letters, no complaints had come for weeks. Maybe, Maria said softly. Or maybe she'll always hold on to anger. But that's her choice. We can't control that. What matters is the neighborhood chose peace. Tom smiled. And we can finally enjoy our home. Maria nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief. For the first time since moving there, she felt they truly belonged not just as homeowners, but as part of a strong, united community. The battle with Karen had ended, but what remained was stronger than fear, trust, fairness, and friendship. And that, Maria thought, was the greatest victory of all.